Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Big hello to all the new subscribers. Finished up that 30 Johnson, got it out of here, and I'm working on another 30. This 30 is a little bit more complex, a little more complicated motor than the old Johnson, and I'll show you what we're looking at here. What it is a Suzuki 30 horsepower, 2-stroke, 3-cylinder, 3-carburetor setup. And I'm going to get some things set up right here to show you the test I did. And then I'll show you the motor and what we're looking at the problems are at the very least. So let me get a couple things set up. I'll be right back and we'll look at this motor. Okay, here she is. I have already removed all 3 carburetors, which entails taking off the air silencer box. That's 4 screws. Then that'll let you get to those 10mm bolts that basically go through everything, through the air silencer, through the carburetors, and into the intake. When I pulled out the spark plugs, one of them was oily and black and the other 2 were completely dry. So the first thing I wanted to do was a spark check to make sure she was getting fire on all cylinders. As you can see, I got my little spark spider hooked up right there. Watch right here and you'll see she does have good spark. All 3 cylinders are hot. Nice poppy spark. So I took off the air silencer, the recoil start. You got to loosen the cables, unhook some hoses. This is a VRO oil injected motor. So you got to take off the bolts that hold the oil tank on, get it tied back out of your way. This one has a throttle valve assembly relay or sensor on the middle carburetor. You got to unhook that. I looked in the intakes for the middle and top carburetor. There was a bunch of yuck in there. I cleaned that out. I had to actually heat 2 of the bolts to get the carbs off. This one here, I had to use a torch and heat it up, which meant I had to do some shielding in here so I didn't melt these hoses, the oil injector hoses. I had to put some shielding there. Got those all cleaned up. Like I said, quite a bit more complicated than, like, say, a 30 Johnson. There's your oil pump and your fuel pump and all that shoved back in there. Sensor wiring. Unhook some linkages and cables and get everything cleaned up. Found a few treasures floating around down in there. So the carbs. I'll be right back to let you see what I found on that. So I'll be right back. Alright, so I got the carbs off, and it was more than just one of them. Here's your middle carburetor, and it looked about like what I thought it would. There's salt. As you can see, it's all plugged up. Just full of the old white cake powder crap. Here's the top carburetor. Same thing, just tons of salt. Same with the bowl. It's yummy in there. And I opened the very bottom carburetor. It wasn't too bad, but these two, I'm surprised the motor even run. I'm surprised the throttle valve assembly sensor and stuff didn't. Well, that may have been what, I don't know what all was going on, but it definitely plugged full of yuck. So I'll get them all taken apart, light off my ultrasonic cleaner, get them cleaned up. I'll be back. Okay, and now I'm going to pull this. I took the float off, and luckily I got the needle out of there. Had to use a nail and a hammer to get the hinge pin out. But anyway, let's take off and see what the emulsion tube looks like. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. Alright, you can see, hard to get any fuel up through there when you got that kind of crap all jammed in there. Oh, again, this is the middle carb. I'll be right back. Okay, one thing I wanted to point out, when you're putting these triplets, these triple carburetor setups back on, you want to hook the carburetors, the linkage for your throttle and your choke, you want to hook that up. Alright, don't hook up any of the other linkage just yet. And don't hook up any of the oiler linkage or anything else, your ground wire. I mean, you can go ahead and snap the throttle valve assembly on, because it's got a lot of play in it. But the reason why is this plastic plate that holds the air silencer on, you have to go with these long bolts through. These long bolts here go through everything, through the silencer back plate, through the carburetors, then into the intake. And to get those bottom two, turn on my light, to get those bottom two bolts, you've got to be able to raise the set of carburetors up like that to get them in, to stab them. So go ahead and stab those bottom two before you hook up any other linkages. And then you can get the whole assembly back on. So I just wanted to point that out, because that's about the most difficult part of getting these things back on. And then you can hook up your oiler linkage, your choke, your main throttle linkage, and you can hook up all those other components. Be right back. Okay, so the carbs are back on, and before you put the oil tank, the VRO oil tank, and the recoil starter back on, you want to come in here and make sure that all your oiler linkages are working. You got a total of 6 hoses. Okay, you got 3 for the oiler, 1, 2, 3, and then you've got 3 for the fuel for the carburetors, 1, 2, and 3. So you want to make sure all 6 hoses are hooked up. You want to make sure your throttle valve assembly sensor is hooked up. Real important, you want to make sure this ground right here to the TVS is hooked up, because it won't work without it. So get all those 6 hoses. Then you want to come over here. You want to make sure that your choke linkage is clear, and make sure all the butterflies close at the same time and so forth. And that's really important with your cables and your throttle. Those all 3 have to open exactly at the same time. Alright. So you can look in the throat there. You want to see all 3 of them opening at the same time. It's hard to see that bottom one. So make sure everything's hooked up. Make sure nothing's going to be in the way of the flywheel. Make sure your cables are in there good and snug and tight. And then all we got to do is put the recoil starter, remount the oil tank, make sure all the hoses are hooked up for the VRO and clear of everything. Then we can put the plugs and silencer back on and give her a test run. Be right back. Alrighty. Forward, neutral, reverse, neutral, Okay. Okay, so there's a 30 horsepower Suzuki 3-cylinder, 3 carburetors. Starts and runs good. So let me shut this door because it's getting cold. So I want to go on just a little bit of a rant here. If you have one of these motors that has the multiple carburetors. Remember that to clean one carburetor takes a certain amount of time. To clean 2, double that time. To clean 3, triple that time. I mention this for a reason. Is because when you take a fuel tank that has marginal fuel in it, has salt water in it, rainwater in it, whatever, the engine ingestion sea spray, because your cowling doesn't fit well or whatever. Remember, it takes a technician 3 times as long to go through 3 carburetors. That's the nature of the beast. So the minute you clip your fuel line to an engine that has multiple carburetors, that one fuel tank, whatever's in it, is going into all 3 carburetors. That's just the design. All right, you have the one carburetor that's fed from the fuel pump, and the other 2 slave off of it and receive the same fuel. If the fuel in the can is shit, then it's going into all 3 carburetors. So something to keep in mind. So if you're going to run one of these type of engines, you might do yourself a favor and get yourself a water fuel separating system. Not that expensive, not that hard to install. You don't even have to hard install it. You can just inline it on your fuel hose. But that's just my little piece of advice there. And then if you do pump crap gas into your engine and you end up with this kind of mess that this engine had, when you take it to your service center or whoever your technician is that's going to do the work, remember that when they asked you questions, what's the symptoms, what's it doing, they're wanting you to explain to them what the symptoms of the engine are, not what you think you know. Not that it's going to be just a simple repair. It's got to be just a loose wire, or it's got to be, don't do that. All right? And simple tests with a spark checker, a compression gauge, a fuel pump pressure reader, different equipment that we have is going to tell us what's wrong with the motor right off the bat. Just looking at the spark plugs a lot of times will tell me what's wrong with an engine. So for somebody that does this every day, chances are your technician's going to know more than you do. All right? And so don't say to them, oh, it's got to be something simple. And then don't say to them, well, it always starts first pull. It spins like a top. It runs like a champ. It purrs like a kitten. If it did, you wouldn't be at their place of business. Okay? Because that means it's not simple, or you would have already corrected it. So don't mean to go on a rant, but it is what it is. And if you're going to run one of these, make sure your fuel is good and have a system installed on your boat that will protect those carburetors. These carburetors were so bad on this motor that I won't clean them again because of the pitting in the bowl, the pitting in the threaded portions where the emulsion tubes and stuff. If this engine comes back, it will have to come back with the understanding that it will need 3 new carb bodies, which is a lot of money. It's an older 2-stroke triplets Suzuki. If the carburetors are available, they're going to be expensive. But if they get into the condition that these were in, whether it can even be repaired without some significant money is questionable. But it's not always just a simple loose wire, or a fouled out plug, or maybe one of the carburetor bowls has a little something in it. It's normally what I find right here. almost total destruction of the carburetors than the bodies themselves. And so when somebody comes into me and says, you know, it's got to be simple, or it's probably just a loose wire, it purrs like a kitten, it spins like a top, and so forth, I say,
warning, bullshit alert.
Then I say,
that was bullshit.
So, remember, a person that decorates cakes for a living probably knows more about decorating cakes than you do. Thanks for watching.